Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. Follow the link in the description to pre-order a copy of the book so you'll be the first to receive it on the release date of September 1st, 2022. The Outdoor Minimalist Podcast has a goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of the process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. In episode 29 of the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast, we are talking about environmental regulation in the outdoor industry and what that looks like. Now, this is a topic that has always really interested me, but I honestly didn't really know that much about it until I had a chance to talk with our guest today. It could arguably be the 8th R of outdoor minimalism, and maybe one day I will add it. But because regulation plays such a big role in environmental policy and how we play outside, it was a very fitting topic for the show. Since this is something I'm far from an expert in, I had the pleasure of chatting with Jeff Bairlein. Jeff Bairlein is the Director of Viristar, an organization that provides training and consulting services to outdoor, travel, experiential, and adventure programs around the world. Viristar specializes in wilderness risk management and outdoor safety training and audits, nonprofit management consulting, wilderness medicine, an environmental education program, and curriculum design. Jeff has a background in environmental advocacy, outdoor-focused lobbying at state and federal levels, and analysis of regulatory and management systems for effectiveness. Before we get to the episode, I just want to remind everyone that the Outdoor Minimalist Patreon is still going strong. Head over to theoutdoorminimalist.com for more information about patron exclusives, bonus episodes, and other content. So thank you so much, Jeff, for joining me on the podcast today. I am excited and really interested to learn more about the role of regulation in the outdoor industry and how that fits into outdoor minimalism in general. But before we get to all of that, could you just tell me more about your experience in the outdoor industry, how it fits into your life, and what you like to do outside?
Sure. Well, I'm glad to be with you here today, Meg, and I do love being outdoors, and I make a point to get out in nature every day. I've been an outdoors person my whole life, camping and backpacking as a kid with my family in northern New England, working at a natural history summer camp run by the Massachusetts Audubon Society, leading overnight canoeing and backpacking trips in New Hampshire as a teenager. And then after I graduated college with a degree in environmental education, I worked for wilderness expedition nonprofits for some 15 years, leading mountaineering, sailing, flatwater and whitewater canoeing, canyoneering, sea kayaking and whitewater kayaking, backpacking, climbing, and caving trips. I got a master's degree in business management and moved into running outdoor education programs and now doing consulting and training for them. So I'm now at a desk a lot, but I do get out and go on long runs in the woods by my home here in Seattle, which is absolutely wonderful and fulfilling.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really extensive background, and I feel like it really makes sense how it led you to what you're working on today in your career. That is one of the reasons why I was excited that we could connect to get that different perspective on different policies and regulation in the outdoor industry. So what makes you interested in talking about the role of regulation in outdoor minimalism?
Sure. Well, regulation can be a very powerful mechanism for supporting environmentally sustainable behavior across a large group of people in a short amount of time. And this is particularly the case with compulsory government regulation. Making outdoor recreation truly environmentally sustainable requires action at all levels. Reducing one's personal consumption and environmental impact in outdoor recreation, as you talk about in your book, Outdoor Minimalist, is one important part of the solution. Think globally, act locally, as you say. And those positive steps can be greatly amplified by well-designed and appropriately enforced regulation. They can help us think globally and act globally, too. In your inaugural podcast episode, you quoted Anne-Marie Bonneau saying, "We don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly. Regulation can help you get there."
So tell me, how does regulation affect the environmental impact that people have when they're enjoying time outside?
That's a great question, Meg. Suppose you want to know if a product, anything from a sleeping bag to a banana, is produced in an environmentally sound way, or for that matter, in a way that supports equity and social justice. But you're confused by various marketing claims and worry about greenwashing, a topic you covered in episode 11. Regulations that set standards for environmentally friendly or socially responsible business practices and truth in advertising can help you cut through the marketing messages and see what's really going on. Similarly, in episode 3 on identifying sustainable products, you talked about how it's confusing when one tries to identify product sustainability throughout the life cycle of an item. Regulatory standards around product manufacture, repair, and disposal can address this. Or perhaps you want to fly to an amazing national park for an outdoor adventure trip, but you're concerned about the carbon footprint of your flight and the effectiveness of the carbon offsets the airline is trying to sell you. You individually can't compel the development of carbon-neutral air travel, but regulation can drive the development of battery and other alternative technologies that can truly decarbonize the air travel sector, as it's in the process of doing with the auto industry.
Yeah, that is a really big topic, regulation in general. So let's back up for a moment. What do you mean by the word regulation?
There are 3 main types of regulation: self-regulation, third-party regulation, and government regulation. Self-regulation examples include an outdoor recreation group agreeing to carpool to the trailhead or put-in, or to follow leave-no-trace principles, or a small outdoor gear manufacturing company agreeing to follow supply chain transparency best practices. Third-party regulation is when an organization agrees to conform to the standards of another entity, often a nonprofit industry association, and undergoes a conformance verification process by that standards body. An example would be a summer camp in the USA being accredited by the American Camp Association, or a park and rec agency being awarded accreditation by the National Recreation and Park Association's Commission for Accreditation of Park and Recreation Agencies, or CAPRA. In the 3rd episode of your podcast, where you talked with Mary Swanson of Lava Linens about how to identify sustainable product materials, she mentioned her company's engagement with B Corp, Climate Neutral, and Blue Sign certifications, and the Masters of Linen mark. These are also examples of third-party regulation. Third-party regulation is generally voluntary, meaning that an organization typically isn't required to be accredited or certified in order to do business. Government regulation and law is direction where compliance is compulsory, with civil or criminal penalty for non-compliance. This can come from the legislature, executive orders, and regulations issued by government agencies, or judicial case law. I should note that although there are differences between legislative acts and executive branch regulation, we're treating them as functionally synonymous here, as they're both government directives which must be followed. All 3 types of regulation have an important role to play in outdoor minimalism and environmental sustainability. However, my focus here is on compulsory government regulation, as that can be enormously powerful in supporting environmental sustainability in outdoor recreation.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great definition and it really helped break it down for me. But can you give some examples of government regulation that can support the goals of outdoor minimalism in general?
Sure. At the federal level, the Great American Outdoors Act of 2020 invests billions in outdoor recreation and funds more equitable access to the outdoors. And there are local success stories too. Here in Washington State, in northwestern USA, in 2019, after decades of effort, local outdoors people successfully advocated for the creation, by an act of Congress, of the Mountains to Sound Greenway National Heritage Area, which, although it's not as robust as an official wilderness area designation, supports environmental protection and outdoor recreation over the area's 1.5 million acres, including 1,600 miles of trails traversing wild rivers, forests, and mountains. And there are also other national legislative and regulatory packages that may be enacted in the near future. The Biden-Harris administration's Build Back Better plan is being revisioned to potentially have a standalone piece on public lands access and protection. And other parts of the Build Back Better plan, if implemented, could do things like help decarbonize the transportation sector so your drive to the trailhead or put-in is fossil fuel free. This is already happening in Europe, where the EU has proposed a ban on the sale of new gas-powered cars starting 13 years from now, and also by executive order in California and by law in New York, where only zero-emissions vehicles will be sold starting in 2035. If your goal is to implement minimalism in all your outdoor pursuits, a wonderful way to do that is to minimize the environmental impact of your travel to outdoor spaces by using petroleum-free transportation. The 30 by 30 Conservation Plan, also known as Conserving and Restoring America the Beautiful, seeks to conserve 30% of the nation's land and waters, creating parks, increasing recreation access, focusing on underserved and nature-deprived communities, protecting biodiversity, and addressing the global climate crisis. And there are a handful of other items working their way through the U.S. Senate, including the Outdoors for All Act, the Environmental Justice in Recreation Permitting Act, and the Outdoor Recreation Act. And listeners may be able to identify local and regional regulation or other governmental actions that help establish, protect, and restore outdoor recreation spaces in their community.
So you already mentioned a few of these, but what are examples of third-party regulation like certification or accreditation schemes that companies can be a part of to foster environmental sustainability in outdoor recreation?
Outdoor experiential adventure organizations can pursue accreditation through the Association for Experiential Education. AEE's standards require accredited programs to follow principles for minimizing environmental impacts when conducting activities, and require program staff to encourage participant awareness of environmental issues and ask relevant questions about environmental problems. Summer camps or year-round camps in the USA can follow accreditation standards of the American Camp Association. This requires accredited camps to provide structured activities that develop awareness for the natural environment and build appreciation and responsibility for the natural environment in campers and minimize the camp's impact on the environment. I mentioned the NRPA's CAPRA accreditation process. This requires accredited park and rec agencies in the USA to have an environmental sustainability policy and procedures to ensure environmental stewardship and a recycling or zero waste plan. In New Zealand, Education Outdoors New Zealand and Recreation Aotearoa's published good practice guidelines recommend following Leave No Trace principles. The state of Kerala in India has issued camping guidelines for adventure tourism, which have detailed minimum impact camping recommendations. The state of Maharashtra, India, last August issued outdoor adventure guidelines, which include leave minimum impact practices, including both L&T principles and locally applicable standards. Outdoor recreation organizations in India can also follow the Eco Code of Conduct published by the Adventure Tour Operators Association of India, which specifies leave no trace policy, using renewable energy resources, and minimizing one's carbon footprint. The Adventure Travel Trade Association's International Adventure Travel Guide Qualification and Performance Standard requires adventure travel guides to be trained on how to minimize impacts on biodiversity, ecosystems, and climate, as well as educate participants on sustainable travel best practices and to take action against illegal wildlife and cultural artifact trade. In Iceland, the Icelandic Tourist Board, or Ferðamálastofa, has a VOTCN quality and environmental certification for outdoor tourism operators with environmental sustainability criteria. And a number of other countries, such as Costa Rica, have similar standards for outdoor recreation operators.
Wow, that's really interesting. I don't know a ton about the certifications and regulations in other countries, so it's really positive to hear about all of those different motivations and movements that are happening around the world. But what's an example of when regulation can build on efforts an individual is making to be mindful about minimizing their personal environmental impact? For example, by purchasing only what they need.
In episode 2 of your podcast, where you talked about 3 of your 7 R's, reduce, refuse, and rethink, you brought up the powerful forces driving unnecessary consumption through relentlessly marketing products produced by companies driven to sell merchandise in a capitalistic market economy. It's hard for individuals to resist these persistent and sophisticating marketing messages. Regulation can help. For example, good regulation could help ensure that environmentally sound practices are employed throughout the entire supply chain, or that the carbon cost of manufacture and distribution is included in the retail price rather than socialized to often the world's most underprivileged people who will be disproportionately affected by the global climate emergency. So even if an individual succumbs to that impulse to snap up that great new outdoor product they see on Instagram, good regulation can reduce the environmental impact of that purchase.
Yeah, people can be enthusiastic about reducing plastic packaging or following leave no trace principles. These are things that individuals can do to make a difference right away. Regulation, though, can appear really distant, abstract, or difficult to influence, or even boring to even the most environmentally committed outdoors people. So when it comes to regulation, what are simple ways people can be involved and make a difference?
Thanks for asking that question, Meg. Taking individual action to influence regulation can be easy and even fun, and it can make a real difference. And it's a great opportunity for people who are looking for next steps beyond minimizing their own individual environmental impact and who want to be a force for good at a regional, national, or global scale. First, make sure you're registered to vote, and vote. You can also donate to political campaigns, organizations, and political leaders who support your environmental sustainability values. And you can donate to advocacy organizations like Earth Justice, which has been really effective in supporting good environmental regulation and legislation across the USA. Or you can give money to a local advocacy organization active in your community, or an organization working in a specific area important to you, like marine conservation or wildlife protection. Money really counts, so your donation can have a big impact. And if you have more time than funds, you can volunteer or work for an industry association supporting sound regulation or an environmental advocacy organization. Your podcast subscribers may have heard in your conversation with an environmental conservation lobbyist about how effective it can be to call and write your legislators to advocate for legislation you believe in. That's exactly right, and it doesn't take long to find the contact information for your political representatives and give them a call and follow up with a brief letter. I think it's useful to take some steps that feel right for you, but not to get overwhelmed by trying to do it all. I'm reminded of what the environmental activist Ed Abbey said. It's not enough to fight for the land, it's even more important to enjoy it. Explore the forests, climb the mountains, run the rivers. So you can write a check to the Sierra Club, then go out and take a hike and let your cares drop off like autumn leaves.
Yeah, I do think that balance is really important. And sometimes it can be really overwhelming to kind of pursue those types of avenues. So I like what you're saying about the different organizations, because there's so many great environmental advocacy organizations that make it really easy to participate in advocacy so it doesn't become so overwhelming. But what about small outdoor businesses? How can they interact with regulation in a way that supports environmentally sustainable outdoor recreation?
Small and startup businesses are really constrained by resource limitations, but there are still simple things they can do. Businesses can support organizations that advocate for common sense regulatory support for environmentally sustainable outdoor recreation, like in the USA, Outdoor Alliance, which is a coalition of national advocacy organizations focused on outdoor recreation, and the Association of Outdoor Recreation and Education, or AOR. On the other hand, businesses can avoid joining, contributing to, or indirectly supporting special interest groups that have a deregulatory or anti-environmental agenda. For example, last year, a coalition of environmental groups called on companies to quit the U.S. Chamber of Commerce until that group ceases pro-fossil fuel lobbying. Patagonia has talked about how the powerful special interest group American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, funded in part by corporate contributions, has fought against environmental regulation. And businesses can practice good self-regulation in their own business activities like material sourcing, minimizing carbon-intensive transportation, and the like. And companies can be part of third-party regulatory regimes like the ones I mentioned earlier, everything from B Corp to associations specific to your industry, whether that be textiles or adventure tourism, that provide guidance and audits to help small businesses act in an environmentally and socially responsible manner.
Okay, so what are some of the challenges facing regulation's role in outdoor minimalism?
Here in the USA, we have a relatively anti-regulatory culture. The influence of large corporations is very strong, and government is comparatively weak. This is really different from places like New Zealand, where the government has a strong voice in creating regulation that supports all people rather than prioritizing the rich and powerful in many aspects of life, ranging from environmental protection to gun violence, bereavement leave, tobacco use, and more. Some observers note a decline in the sense of civic duty that American corporations once held, for example, to pay a living wage to support a robust middle class, and which in some companies has been replaced by pursuing maximum profit above all else. These corporations wage a relentless battle to weaken or dismantle regulation of all kinds and the government institutions that uphold those regulations. And people's general reluctance to share, compromise, consider the well-being of others, and defer short-term gain in favor of long-term benefit works against a society where we mutually agree to be regulated for the benefit of all. Finally, good regulation is really difficult to get right. It's very hard to craft regulatory guidance that strikes the right balances and to update it on an ongoing basis to appropriately reflect changing circumstances. And regulation is only as effective as its enforcement regime, so even excellent regulation is of little use without an ongoing investment in robust enforcement mechanisms.
Yeah, those are all really good points. And I think that it's really easy to kind of get stuck on that. I know that I noticed more of that push against regulation from individuals during COVID. So it is really interesting to think about all of the negatives. But what makes you optimistic about environmentally sustainable outdoor recreation practices?
I've been involved professionally in outdoor recreation, environmental education, and advocacy for 35 years, and I've never seen this level of awareness and interest and passion that we have today for doing the critical things we need to do for environmental sustainability and social justice, like decarbonizing the global economy and focusing on issues of equity and inclusion in outdoor programs. In episode 2 of your podcast, where you talked about reduce, refuse, rethink, you mentioned the How to Save a Planet podcast episode called Is Your Carbon Footprint BS?, which identified large-scale action as essential to decarbonizing the economy. Regulation is critical to this goal, and the world is taking action here in really important ways. National governments around the world and regulatory bodies of all sizes are working to create well-developed regulatory and legislative structures to help people from all walks of life to have access to beautiful outdoor spaces where they can enjoy nature, participate in healthy exercise and exhilarating adventure, and refresh their spirit. Government bodies across the globe are increasingly recognizing the immense economic, social, ecological, and public health benefits of outdoor spaces and outdoor recreation, and they're creating regulations, funding streams, and institutions to maximize those positive outcomes. And individuals and businesses are coming up with creative new ways to support responsible outdoor recreation and all the benefits it brings. And they're contributing time, talent, and money to causes and organizations that are making a difference. There's urgent work to be done to protect the natural environment and foster equitable access to nature, but I am really pleased to see many people, like you, Meg, and I'm sure many of your listeners, taking effective action to build a world where environmentally sustainable outdoor recreation opportunities are accessible to all.
Yeah, I think that that's all very true. I mean, I definitely have noticed more of an uptick in involvement, it seems. And I I always am a little confused on if I am just noticing it more because I'm integrating myself in it more or if it's actually increasing. But it was really interesting to hear about all of the different types of regulation that are possible and that are positive. And I know there was a lot of information in this episode. So all of the organizations that Jeff mentioned, I will include links to those in the show notes. So if you're driving or something and you can't look at it now, you can go back later and maybe find a couple that would resonate with you in your area. But with that, how can people learn more about your journey and stay in contact with you?
Sure. Well, people can go to the website viristar.org and learn more about the work that I do through that organization, supporting quality and sustainable outdoor recreation and outdoor education. And they can be in touch with me through that website and that organization.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll include those links as well. But before you go, I'm just interested in what you do with that organization. So can you just talk a little bit about your main focus with that?
Sure. The organization really sprang from my decades of work in outdoor education, adventure education, and outdoor recreation and similar types of activities. And I started getting asked for advice really about safety and quality and curriculum design from, at first, friends of mine. And they said, hey, could you come take a look at my organization and give me some guidance? Or, could you even come and do a workshop and I'll invite other people from the community. All you got to do is show up and talk and we'll take it from there. And that kind of snowballed to where I was doing this sort of on the side in addition to my day job, and it grew and grew, and eventually I quit my day job because it was getting too much to do both, and incorporated Viristar. And now I have a really wonderful team of folks all around the world that provide consulting and training guidance to outdoor recreation, outdoor education, wilderness, adventure education, and similar programs who are interested to run the highest quality, most equitable, best managed for risk, and most successful outdoor programs possible.
Awesome. I love that. I feel like a lot of times that is kind of how we get into those positions. People are asking us questions and then it just kind of happens. And that's wonderful. I'm really happy that you're out there helping people in the outdoor industry manage risk in that way. And I am extra grateful that you had time to come and share your knowledge and expertise on the show.
It's my pleasure to be with you, Meg.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. New content has begun to appear on the Outdoor Minimalist Patreon. Head over to theoutdoorminimalist.com for more information about our listener support and patron exclusives. You can still find me on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book. Follow there for daily updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with a shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.